Welcome to the Future of Supply Chain, presented by Dynamo. Each episode, we sit down with leaders in the industry as we build the future of supply chain together. Let's get into the show. Here's our host, Santosh Sankar.
Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Future of Supply Chain podcast. I'm your host, Santosh Sankar. Joining me today is Pedro Neto, supply chain data scientist at HP. Welcome, Pedro. It's great to have you join.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So you have affiliation both with HP as well as the Association for Supply Chain Management, both of which are household names for our listeners. And so rather than my kind of standard, tell us a bit about what you do, who you work for, the thing I'm curious about is what's your story? How did you end up kind of entering into this world and this realm where you're able to kind of mesh your background in data science to supply chain operations? And I will say, as a fellow Nittany Lion, I was super kind of cheesed to see that you as well hail from Penn State. And hopefully we can both celebrate come January with the national championship. But with that, I'll turn it over to you. Talk to us about your career in supply chain.
Yeah, we got a great team at a great chance. So I made up my own title. So I'm a supply chain data scientist, and what's always driven me from a young age, even before I knew about supply chain and math and tools, was just the wonder of how math and problem solving can really have an impact in the real world. And as I started going through school, as I started learning more techniques, I just saw, okay, where can I actually apply these cool things they see in the classroom into the real world? And, I just discovered that most of the world is supply chain, about 70% from services to products. So you have everything, even data. And it's I can't think of a field where you have even more impact to all types of all people. So it's a real exciting space where you can actually make a really big difference. So that led to where can I get my degree where I can learn the most and have the most impact. So led me to Penn State, as well as HP, with the breadth of our supply chain maturity, as well as opportunities to really impact every person on the planet. And then in parallel, I've also been part of ASCM for many decades now. And it's just been so wonderful to be part of an organization that can really represent a wide multitude of industries with that same mission of making the world better through supply chain.
Amazing. And so I'm going to jump into it right now. But you've spoken previously in other venues and formats about both the opportunities as well as the challenges that generative AI presents. And I'd love to, I guess, just start off with kind of what you see in terms of opportunities as a practitioner, as somebody who looks at the world through the lens of data, and data being very important equally in developing and standing up performant AI solutions. How do you think about it? What are you kind of staring at as saying, hey, kind of the world's our oyster?
Yeah, all of us see the opportunities. AI has been around here enough that we see the flashy demos on the consumer side and what things can do with video and text and pictures and all these cool things. But it's really the big opportunity is, okay, how can we actually use it to make real work? And this is where every AI company is now maturing into is software as a service, as well as how to get into the enterprise. But simply put, it's just a new way of working, a new way of learning, and a new way of interacting with the world. It's easier to think about things that it doesn't impact than it is to list out all the things that it can. And the challenges are simply that it is a very different type of technology. If you look with Excel, you put in 2 + 2, you always get the same results. And a lot of these AI models that inherently they're going to make up some information sometimes or give you different answers. But that's actually the strength of these systems. If they were always super rigid and always giving the exact same thing, that they actually can't mimic creativity and give you new and different things. Both are really important. You cannot have an inventory ERP system where you are just putting in numbers that you are mostly confident in. Those have a lot of big impacts, but you see the excitement and the ability to be more productive on so many different things. And to reconcile those two things, simply put, it's both things are true at the same time. And there's just a lot of effort of how do you take advantage of the opportunities while being mindful of those downsides and being comfortable in embracing those things being in harmony and conflict at the same time.
And so, have you found that kind of practitioners or supply chain operators, as much as they kind of recognize and acknowledge the benefits within organizations to apply AI, the one thing I've stumbled into, and in part because of kind of the hallucinations that you've alluded to, um, have certainly kind of stumbled into people, I would say, especially the last quarter and a half, 2 quarters, with a fatigue, right? You kind of talk about AI and they start to just kind of fatigue us. Oh man, like, could we not maybe talk about that? And kind of curious what you might have to share and the perspective you have, because I think you're spot on as to it's not a perfect technology for perhaps every situation, but it certainly has immense promise and has the potential for immense impact where maybe we should not fall victim to fatigue, even if it might be very well deserved.
Yeah, and I think that fatigue really stems through, you get this sugar high of excitement of seeing a new thing, and then ultimately care about is that there's an actual business impact, right? And if there is that lag for all sorts of reasons, or it doesn't materialize, right, it just doesn't pass the so what test. But what I've found and what I've kind of seen through working with use cases and talking to a lot of different people is it's almost a little bit like three-dimensional chess, in the sense of, let's say you're not getting that business impact. It could be for a lot of different reasons. Is it, I don't have the skills that I'm using it properly? Is it that the AI model is not quite smart enough to what I particularly have a use case? Or is it just the user interface and how things are integrated and the data? And all these things are changing at the same time. So I'll have an opinion on a particular tool and use case, but maybe 1 week later, one of those little variables changes, and all of a sudden, I went from something that I was fatigued and it doesn't work to all of a sudden it does work. So I've just been incredibly humble of an opinion that I have on something, for good or for bad. Wait or change, or you get a little bit smarter, get a little bit better, and things can change pretty quickly from not working to making a big impact.
What should kind of supply chain organizations be prioritizing when it comes to kind of applying Gen AI? Curious, kind of your thoughts, or perhaps you have peers who you're kind of able to pattern match against and say, hey, like, these are the things that are being prioritized equally.
Yeah, so I'll answer this kind of a few different ways. The first is you have to do what makes sense. Going after a shiny object just for the sake of it. Like, I'm a huge fan of AI, of course, and that impact. But at the end of the day, we're not doing cute use cases or trying to make art or film or do some other things where there's like a coolness factor. It's it just has to be really practical. So if your organization is on a maturity level where you're working on really basic block and tackle, SNOP, and other different critical things, it's okay that maybe AI is not quite right at the top of your priorities. You have easier things to do that don't need these kind of more advanced things. But at the same time, though, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're not making those investments to think ahead of, okay, how can this be impactful, and how can I actually use this to break up the logjam? Now, that's just kind of like a little bit of a fluffy kind of high-level answer. In short, it's don't do it just for the sake of doing it. Make sure you're doing it for like a real impact. And kind of the simple kind of three-part strategy that I found is pretty obvious, and this applies to any other type of technologies. It's kind of three things. So one is, people and the knowledge of your organization using these particular tools. Second is what kind of tech stack that you are using, which I've been so happy the past year that the ability of accessing different tools and integration and not having to spend millions of dollars on consulting tools, and something just comes in for free with your $20 a month subscription, whatever it is, that has just been really exciting to see. And then the third is applying just a really simple AI data governance model on your data, prioritizing use cases, and then just going for those use cases that have that maximal ROI. Start with the lowest hanging fruit and just get some sort of wins of applying your people with your tech stack, and just focus on that quantifiable business impact.
And how might one kind of suss out where to begin to apply this technology in this organization? Because for as many groups that have tried and or are trying to experiment with this, there are equally folks who might only now be wrapping their heads around what Gen AI can do, but then are kind of questioning, where do I even begin? And maybe equally, where can I begin and also generate results quickly? Curious.
Yeah, there's a few different ways to think about it, and well, there's lots of frameworks and lots to think about it. The way I like to think about it is to first start with an area where Gen AI is going to have the most amount of opportunities, be the most successful, with the least amount of downsides. And I'll kind of give two extreme examples. The first is these models do really well with text, right? So they're trained on text. They're in the English language, other languages as well. So if you're having some use cases that are like reading emails, summarizing, look at contracts, understanding knowledge, right? If it gives a wrong answer, you're more likely to be able to catch that than if you're going to the extreme. If your first use case is that you want to eliminate planning and give all power to an agentic AI that places POs on your behalf, you're going to have a bad time, right? And that is a numerical use case where there's like a lot of power that you are giving, and you don't necessarily how it's coming up. But on the other side, if you have a use case where there's already people, it's a process that you can help with by summarizing, looking at text, analyzing, and viewing things. And if it makes a wrong answer, you have simple mechanisms baked in that you can catch. And then there's lots of other use cases in between that you can get to numerical. I would also say to start with productivity versus like big tops-down projects. I'll give an example. I think some companies fall victim to, CEO says, you know what, thou shall replace our planning system. We will have a new procurement, and no one else in the company really knows how to AI, except a couple of people, and it's just either consulting or some data scientists and managers who kind of pretend to be AI pundits but don't do things themselves. And it's like this push down towards this organization. There's going to be management of change issues. It's going to take a long time. Versus the other way is, well, what if you just had most of your workforce be 10%, 20% productive? It's not like a really giant use case, but piece by piece of what people are doing in the everyday workforce, you're going to get those benefits a lot sooner. And you're going to enable those people who know the business and the actual context and problems that you're solving to actually come up with new ideas. And going this way doesn't presume and exclude the latter. So let's say you get your workforce trained up, they have simple tools, they come up with ideas, they're getting excited, they're getting a little bit productive. When you do come up with a use case or a tops down that we're going to, you know what, they're going to better to receive it, call BS on it. Let's say some consulting company or someone's pitching an idea. They can say, you know what, this is all smoke and mirrors. They're just doing a wrapper over ChatGPT. We can build ourselves. Or actually, no, there is a lot of value in this, and here's how actually we can do better. That's going to be a much faster turning flywheel of true impact and innovation than trying to just jam it down just for the sake of it.
So I'd love to get a bit concrete for our listeners here, and walk through an example of where you've seen Gen AI be able to substantially be applied to handle a very complex task, and equally that allowing that because it's applied to that task, you now have people who have freed up bandwidth and can do something higher value. Would love to walk through that.
I will tweak your question just a little bit when you say complex. And, there's a lot of things that these models can do extremely well, much more complex. The part that I'm actually more excited about are places where it can do something sufficiently accurate. So maybe it doesn't do something super complex, but speed is by far the number one advantage that you can get no matter what you're looking at. And sometimes, okay, maybe not completely accurate, but if you have a use case where complex or not, but if you can just do with sufficient accuracy, maybe it's 80% accurate, and then those people have an exception. This is where I think a lot of the values come in. Now, specifically, I'll kind of give two examples. One is just very simple knowledge management, and this is not part of the complex, but just taking documentation, training of whatever projects they're working on, having that information be in one place, and just have a simple agent that's able to grab that knowledge, be really focused on it. A couple of years ago, you have to like have data scientists train. Now, just out of the box, you can use Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and just point it to those documents. And people can just interact and get knowledge from people and from teams and SharePoint sites and whatever it is in such a fast way. It's accessible, it reduces the barrier, and it's just something that no one loves to do. Like, oh, I can't wait today to make training documentation, right? Super simple, low-hanging fruit, but it has a large impact. And every project should just have AI agents, plural, that are just pegged alongside it. Another kind of a different type of use case is within supply chain. I mentioned text. Contracts are a big kind of text-based use case. The legal implications, just the length of them, the legalese, and just how much time. So, I've just seen a particular use cases where you used to just have to scan for, let's say you're buying a company or onboarding a new supplier and just trying to match and everything. Yes, there's a lot of consequences. You don't want to give the power all to AI, but the ability for it to scan thousands of pages of these really nuanced Incoterms and FOB terms and who pays the tariff on this or who owns in this free trade zone, and to kind of map and understand that, it's just going to be able to read through and give you quick insights that will just take you so much labor and effort that you could make mistakes on. And, it's not that one has to be better than the other. This is just another misconception. It's like, oh, it messed up this or it's better than that. It's just taking the best of both worlds. There's pros and cons of people. There's pros and cons of these AI models. And our job is to put them together where we get the best of both worlds and we minimize the worst of each.
What about kind of situations of model drift, data outages, where kind of there's a risk that the output is inaccurate, or rather the model is not able to execute? How should one kind of think about failing gracefully as they assemble these tools together, or perhaps adopt something off the shelf from a vendor, even a startup in that sense?
Yeah, now you're getting a little bit technical with model drift, and for those in the audience who may not know, this is just when a model that you think is performing at a certain level, and just for various reasons where it starts to degrade. The number one thing that I focus with any models, whether it's AI or some other type of analytics, is always the evaluations. Just answering the simple question, how do you know it's right? So I rather have a system where I have really robust ways to automatically see how a model is doing, give it a score, how accurate it is, and having something be a very simple analytic than having a really advanced analytic that everyone told me is the best thing. And if I don't have a really robust way to test it, I rather have the smaller, simpler thing that I can really test it. And, the other importance that I don't think organizations spend enough time on is the repeatability of a really good evaluation. So let's say you spend $300K, you have this type of model, and it's like all custom built, and go through and you evaluate it. That works, kind of go through. And then all of a sudden you get a new model, you get a new ChatGPT 5, 6, and go through, you want to swap. And how do you easily swap between? Versus if you really invested in making evaluations and how to score agnostic to what model is, you just swap the thing out and you can try 30 different systems. And maybe if it works, something works now, wait a week and there'll be maybe a new model to try. And, those evaluations are just the foundation where you can see the areas that it needs to improve on. Maybe you need to cut it down. Maybe it only works well in North America, and then you can, turn off other areas, or you can look to see how to expand from there. I can't imagine building anything without having that robust. And some of the other things that you mentioned about drift and other stuff, to me, those are just continuations of building upon that foundation of evaluations.
And how do you think about kind of data security? Gen AI kind of has demonstrated perhaps I don't want to say unusual, but indirect ways where sensitive data might be shared inadvertently. IP as well could be shared inadvertently. And when you kind of put certain data sets together, if a model as well is provisioned to improve itself based on your interaction, your usage, the data that you provision it to, there could be some tragic implications of that.
Yeah. So if you're a consumer, you've kind of always lived with this social media risk, your information, your cookies, and all through. The enterprise is more difficult and simple at the same time. It's more difficult that you have to have more specific tools and the implications and those processes. It's simpler in the sense of you just have to have a virtual private cloud environment. You just have to have your own secure environment where you're not using these public tools. No one inside of a company should be using their company login on ChatGPT or whatever else. That's just making it too easy to trace. There is just so many different ways to have your own secure environment where there's just no chance for these models to be training on your data, taking it out. All the cloud service providers have this. And it's just simple IT security 101, right? You just follow through the compliance, the SOC 2, the whole 9 yards, and you just make sure that you are using these tools in a secure environment. There's so many different playgrounds. Azure has a studio, Amazon Bedrock, and within Copilot in your enterprise. And a lot of these AI tools, they're just being folded into software they already have a relationship. You have Salesforce, you already have your cybersecurity protocols in there, right? You use Einstein AI, you make sure that they're following those rules, and okay, poof, you're all set to go. So it's simple in the sense of this just follows the same kind of data governance that you would do to onboard a supplier, a vendor, credit card platform, e-commerce, supply chain with the factory. It's just the continuation.
Last question here for you before we get into kind of our wrap up mode. What do you think best helps organizations adopt AI?
Yeah. So, just to build off a little bit more of kind of that 3-part strategy. So, people, the tech stack, and just focusing on the use cases. But I'll just go into a couple other areas that kind of relate to that. So, with the people, you just really need to empower people to use it.
So kind of just statement a culture underpinning that.
Definitely a culture, and just reiterate, okay, this is the new way of us working together. I'll borrow a little anecdote from Kevin Rusa, New York Times tech columnist. He mentioned forklift versus weightlifting. So if your people are doing the tasks to weight train, you're learning a new skill, you're in school, you're trying to grow, learn how to code, AI is not going to be a great use for that. But if you are doing a forklifting operation, you're just moving data around, or you're just getting a quick summary and thing, those are great things to use AI, and just jumping into seeing, there's nothing like using these tools directly to see the pros and cons. So I'd say kind of less punditry and considering things, and just more actions to go ahead and try to go and do it. And then providing the tools for your people to succeed. There's just so many easy tools. I definitely recommend more buy versus make. So I would rather pay a monthly subscription to XYZ provider, you name it, and then tomorrow you just wake up with new capabilities than trying to develop that in-house. So obviously there's going to be some cases of that, but it's just a delight when all of a sudden, okay, Microsoft Copilot has ChatGPT 5 automatically into it, or whatever your thing may be. And then with the use cases, just be greedy. Start with the smallest use case, get a win, keep high standards, and you don't have to swing for the fences right at the first. Just try it out and get your first win.
Amazing. Well, with that, Pedro, I'm going to kind of shift to close us out here in what I call rapid fire. I'm going to present a question or statement, and I want your immediate 20-second response to that. You ready?
Come, let's do it.
What is overhyped in supply chain AI?
I would say having nearly all of decisions being decided by AI. It can be smart, but there's a lot of simple rule-based things. I still think dashboards and other simple things like that are, if you can do it something simply, maybe, AI doesn't have to be the answer.
A KPI you find to be irrelevant.
No, there's so many. I'll give you two. One is lines of code. I don't care if AI generates code or people. All I want to know is it capable? Can I integrate my tech stack? Can it do something? I don't care how many lines of code, but some people like to show off. But now with AI generated code, it really doesn't matter. A second KPI is number of systems. A small number and big number can be equally terrible. It's more about the capabilities. You could have 20 systems would be chaotic, but you can have 20 systems where you have a really good data layer and you have like really good apps built on top of it and specialized. That could be fantastic too.
And then finally, what's a tool you wish you could have just by simply snapping your fingers and it appears?
Yeah, to me, this is where, and I think more of these tools are coming into place. And these are where these AI models get faster and faster at running code in the background to give you an answer. So, I talked about these text-based use cases, but in supply chain, many others, you actually need something numeric. So if I can trace and be confident of like how a number is being calculated and it runs pretty quickly, where these AI systems run code in the background and give it to you, they can't do that, and they're getting better and better at that. So I'm really excited about that ability rolling out more and more.
Amazing. Well, with that, Pedro, appreciate you joining us, indulging us here in conversation. Speak soon.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us at dynamo.vc for all the latest episodes. We'll see you next time.